Hello, this is Mrs. Workman. Algebra. Use the figure to find the indicated variable. Explain your reasoning. If the measure of angle 1 equals 16x minus 8, the measure of angle 2 equals 4 times the quantity y plus 8, and the measure of angle 3 equals 14x plus 2, find x and y. We're given a diagram, and right now what I know about the diagram, because of these symbols, is that these lines are parallel, and because of the double arrow symbol on both of these, this is another pair of parallel lines. So we have a pair of parallel lines here and another pair of parallel lines here. That will be important a little bit later. Before I begin, let's take the information that we're given and put it on our diagram. We're told that the measure of angle 1 is 16x minus 8. Here is angle 1, and so I'm going to put 16x minus 8 right here. I'll need that later. We're told that the measure of angle 2 is 4 times the quantity y plus 8. Here's angle 2, and its measure is 4 times the quantity y plus 8. And the final piece of information I'm given is the measure of angle 3. Here's angle 3, and its measure is 14x plus 2. Alrighty, we are asked to find x. So I'm looking at the given measures of those three angles, and I notice that there's an x in the expression that is the measure of angle 1, and there's an x in the expression that is the measure of angle 3. Now, what do I know about angles 1 and 3 with respect to the whole diagram? Well, because line M and line N are parallel, and they are cut by this transversal, I know that the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 3. In other words, I know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 by the corresponding angle postulate. In other words, angle 1 and angle 3 are corresponding angles, and because these lines are parallel cut by a transversal, those corresponding angles are congruent. So the measures of angle 1 and the measure of angle 3 are equal, and that's the definition of congruent angles. I'm given that the measure of angle 1 is 16x minus 8, and the measure of angle 3 is 14x plus 2. So by substitution, I know that 16x minus 8 is equal to 14x plus 2. Now at this point, we use some of our algebra to solve for x. I'm going to subtract 14x from both sides, and that would give me 2x minus 8 equals 2. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. 2x equals 10, and finally divide both sides by 2, which tells me that x is 5. So using the geometry of corresponding angles and congruency and a little bit of algebra down here, we have determined that x is equal to 5. Now that we've found our x, we still need to find the y. And so we're going to go back and look at our diagram, and we realize that the measure of angle 2 contains the y. And so we need to use angle 2 to write an equation. This time, let's concentrate on these two parallel lines and line M as the transversal. Again, let's look at this pair of parallel lines cut by this transversal. When we do that, we notice that angle 1 and angle 2 are what's called alternate exterior angles, and we know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because they are formed when a pair of parallel lines is cut by a transversal. So this is the alternate exterior angle theorem. Now, by the definition of congruent angles, I know that the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 2. So, by substitution, we are given that the measure of angle 1 is 16x minus 8. We know that the measure of angle 2 is 4 times the quantity y plus 8, and so they must be equal. So we have used some geometry, and we have now an algebra equation to solve. Now this particular algebra equation contains two variables. However, in the first part of the problem we determined that x was 5. So right here I can do another substitution. For x, and when I do, then I just have one unknown, the y, in the resulting equation. So let's use some algebra now to solve for y. 5 times 16 minus 8 is 72. And using the distributive property, we'll subtract 8 using the distributive property. Let's try that again. Mrs. Workman, 4 times y is 4y. 4 times 8 is 32. Now we've used the distributive property correctly. We're going to subtract 32 from both sides and divide both sides by 4. And we find that y is 10. If we recap this part of the problem just very briefly, we used what we know about alternate exterior angles and congruency. We substituted in some given information and then solved the resulting equation to find that y is equal to 10.